In these three paths, you have action, belief, and knowing. And it's up to us to decide which path resonates with us most. And we back with another reflection on the Daily Vedantic. And today's reflection is on the three paths. Repetition is power, so oftentimes I'll repeat different concepts within this philosophy. And one of the most fundamental notions within this philosophy is that there are three classical paths to the divine. There are the three classical paths of yoga. Yoga means union, so these are the three paths to union. And in Sanskrit, it'd be Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. Spelled G-N-A-N-A. Jnana Yoga. That's where we get, it's the same root in which we get ignorant or gnosis or Gnostic, agnostic. It's all the same Proto-Indo-European language root. The three classical yogas, Karma, Bhakti, and Jnana, they translate in English. And I love just kind of dispensing with the fancy, exotic sounding Sanskrit, getting right to the English versions because, well, this philosophy describes the universe. So when you describe it in the language that we use each day, it's describing our universe. And it maps so perfectly to it. The three classical approaches are karma, which is service or action, and karma yoga, that is service, is action to the higher. Bhakti is devotion to the higher, love to the higher, and jnana is knowledge, studying, listening, reading the words of the masters. So there are three classical approaches and paths. Now there are a million other versions of yoga in India or here in SoCal. There's, I just saw acrobatic yoga on my way to work yesterday. So there's goat yoga, there's yoga nidra, there's a million forms. Flow. I just did power yoga on Wednesday. So there are a million different incarnations, but the three classical paths, spiritual paths, are karma, bhakti, jnana. Service, devotion, knowledge. There's also fourth path of hatha yoga, which is the physical yoga we all know, that we see. That's the yoga studio. That's the asanas, the postures that you'd take on, and that's great for the body. But classically, it is seen that you either approach the divine through service, devotion, knowledge. And if you can't do any of those three, then go stand on your head in a hatha yoga pose. But as you elevate beyond standing on your head and you move towards service, devotion, knowledge, it's usually a mixture of all three for any of us. You have conventional interpretations of Christianity that are more devotional. It's looking up to the higher, devotion to Christ, devotion to the Father above, and a ritualization of devotion towards them. They are dualistic, meaning that there is a separation between you and them. You have a service-oriented person that is just partially devoted. Maybe they are somewhat interested in the concepts, the knowledge, the philosophy behind a tradition. They might be more like Mother Teresa, where it's just action all the way. Just tell me where to serve, and their love, their understanding, and their spiritual pursuit comes through their body. For the devotional person, it might be their heart. Their spiritual pursuit comes from their heart, or the heart-mind, as would be described in Vedanta. Or you have someone driven by the intellect that has, and again, let me underscore the fact that essentially everyone has all three. One in a generation might just skip a step, skip the service or the devotion, but even that might be a stretch. Maybe one every 100 years. So it is largely seen as every one of us has our own specific mixture. 10, 20% karma, 10, 20, 30% bhakti, the remainder being knowledge, jnanic type of approach to spirituality. And I should listen to my own words and actually stick to just the English for this conversation. But it can be helpful in case you come across these terms within Vedanta, because you will, if you study it for any length of time, they are mentioned quite often. But today's reflection isn't just about recounting those three paths and articulating the notion that we all are all three. It's also mapping to our three equipments: the body, the mind, and our intellect. You have karma yoga, you have that service, maps to the body. All of us, like I said, we're all a mixture of all three of these, so we all must pay attention to our bodies. And the best way to pay attention to the body in action is devote to the higher. Devote that action at the gym to being a great example for those around you. Serving yourself. Being more useful to your community because of improved health or strength. Or it could be, quite literally, going out, handing out socks to the homeless. They say socks are much more of a need than more food. And the slightly elevated path above service and karma yoga, bhakti yoga, is devotion. Devoting to a pastor, a teacher, a guru. That devotion, devoting to God, could be your personal God. And this philosophy is also crystal clear that a personal God is extremely valuable. So it might be Christ, it might be Krishna, it might be Muhammad or Buddha. And I obviously say that full well knowing that most conventional interpretations of each tradition, they love the line about it's only this teacher, no other teachers. Another reason that I like Vedanta is there's a galaxy of sages and saints that have come to guide us. And every once in a while, you get a lighthouse that people talk about for thousands of years. Those are rare. Suffice it to say, those are rare. But they end up becoming amazing personal gods and deities and divine incarnations for their followings. And that would be a devotional approach. Truly listening to what they said or are saying and following it to a T. Not just worshiping. But Christ is a good example. He said, follow me, far more frequently than he said, worship me. And then last but not least, and so often left out, so many doctrines around the world. And yet, it is so critical, is the application, cultivation, development of the intellect through knowledge of the self, knowledge of the supreme, ground of being. That knowledge, that Jnana Yoga, is that third equipment, that second inner equipment, the intellect and the mind. And if you want a primer on the body, the mind, the intellect, episode 1 of the Daily Vedantic goes over those three equipments and perhaps the central contribution of this philosophy in terms of our practical lives is outlining those three equipments. But you need all three. They map to the body, the mind, the intellect. And the last thing that I'll say is they also map to action, to belief, or to knowing. Because another way of saying all of this is that in these three paths, you have action, belief, and knowing. Action in service for yourself and those around you. Belief into a viewpoint, a worldview, a religious belief, a belief in God. And then the highest, according to Vedanta, is knowing. Not a belief in God, but knowing God. You don't get there with the intellect. It's far too limited to know the infinite. But it is like a pole vaulter using a pole, using the intellect to jump over the bar to where Swami will say so often in this same analogy, You can't cross the bar with the pole, and you can't cross the bar without the pole. The intellect takes you, if you take to this path, within Vedanta, of that path of knowledge, it takes you to the very, very end. And then divinity itself takes you above that bar, across the finish line, into transcendence. And that is what the masters have said for thousands and thousands of years. And in this path, like I said, it can be distilled into studying the words of the masters. So those are the three paths within Vedanta, within the entirety of world traditions. And it's up to us to decide which path resonates with us most. You can find your way to the divine in any of them. You can find your way to the divine in any of them. And unlike most traditions, this one really implores you to find the right one for you. 1 in 10,000 will find this philosophy, these concepts, knowledge of the self, interesting. It does not expect or try to evangelize to get 100 out of 100 people on board. I love that aspect of this philosophy. And it really makes room for all of our different temperaments. But it is clear that we should all reflect on what our temperament is, what speaks to us most, and follow that path. That's today's reflection on the Daily Vedantic. We'll see you next time.